For many people, the topic of extraterrestrial life is perceived as science fiction, conspiracy theories, government secrets, or Hollywood films. We're not moving towards Disclosure Day, it's already here. In this episode, we're exploring the latest Steven Spielberg Disclosure Day film and the growing discussions around extraterrestrial intelligence. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Christel Rosenkilde Christensen, and we're delving into what these conversations reveal about who we are. Christel has had her own experiences with non-human intelligences and consciousness beyond what most people would consider ordinary reality, and so have I. Together, we're going to explore what these experiences mean, how they relate to intuition, consciousness, soul awareness, and whether the separation we make between human and alien is as clear as we think it is. Really, when you look at it, the inherent abilities we describe as psychic, intuitive, spiritual, or transcendent still sit outside conventional understanding of what it means to be human. So the question isn't whether aliens exist. The question is, what is real?
What's the definition of insanity? Ain't it just a difference in reality?
This is the SoulLife Psychology podcast where intuition meets logic and you remember who you are and why you're here. I'm Dr. Toni Reilly. Christel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Me too. So, Christel, we both saw Disclosure Day recently, which prompted us to want to have this conversation and talk about how we see how it was presented and how we can explain how it works for us in our lives and with our work. So one of the things I wanted to start with was that Disclosure Day is apparently not here yet, but I thought actually my observations were they've been preparing humanity for 75 years now, maybe even 76, because apparently the first sighting or landing was in 1950. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, and I think it's so exciting that this movie is called Disclosure Day, because when we look at our present history, we say maybe 75 years we've been prepared for this. And if you look at astrologers, what they have said about June 2026, they said that that would be the month where extraterrestrial conversations and evidence were being brought to mainstream. So even with spiritual philosophers, astrologers, and many others has talked towards this specific time. But if we look at different cave drawings and many other symbolism from thousands and thousands of years ago, we also find some sort of not necessarily evidence, but symbolism that shows and point to the fact that there has been communication, there has been visits, we have been in touch for thousands and thousands of years. And we're all connected, not only to each other on this very planet. To me, it's a universal thing. Why would we be separate from the entire universe? So why would we be separate from life, from other life forms? If we truly think about it, then I think it is such a natural thing that has become something that had to be closed rather than disclosed. So I'm very excited to have this talk today, Toni, especially also because I know both you and I have felt connected with universal life. And I'm not used to talking about this anywhere, because I usually don't speak about this very topic, because I don't want to confuse consciousness with conspiracy. So I really hope that the people that are listening will be open and try and just sense, if they in any ways have felt connected to something outside of themselves, not necessarily physically in front of them, but maybe in communication more telepathically or energetically. So I think it's an important conversation to have, because I don't want to call it normal, but it's absolutely something that many people would have felt or experienced, but we just don't talk about it in public. And I'll share more about that, how I was even warned against it by somebody visiting me. We'll talk about that later in the show, but I'm very excited about it.
Indeed. Whoa. So I guess you've probably even covered that. I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on disclosure, but you started off. See, how psychic are you? How in tune? I really feel like people who see this film are going to realize that this is part of who they are already, because the way that they've represented those characters, particularly Emily Blunt's character, who is going into, I guess you would call it a trance, but just into a slightly altered state. And then what she's actually doing is psychically tuning to the people. This is not really giving away in spoilers if you haven't seen it, but the point is that's what they're representing, her as having psychic ability, which is basically being able to tune to someone who's alive and know what's going on for them. So there's that aspect. And there's other things in there that I could really bring back to what we see in our work. But let's start with that character that's doing the psychic tuning to a few people in the film. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, or your observations on how it works for you. Because when we conversed before, you said, that's how it works for me. So it's really exciting to hear how people's process works, their psychic ability or their intuitive ability. So give us a rundown on how that works for you.
We might have to do a little bit of warning for spoiler alerts, because if we go into these characters, I think it's important just for people to visit themselves. Have I seen the movie? Do I want to see it before and then come back to this show? And I'm sure if you come back to this, you'll feel even more seen and heard and have a further understanding what's possible with the human consciousness. But I really want to try not to be too much spoiling anything, but I think we will get to talk more into depth about the roles, because when you talk about Emily Blunt and how she channels or streams or having a flow going through her, she both channel the language directly from how she hears it being communicated, but she also in the meeting with people suddenly have a clear knowing about what's most important, what's most significant for them. And I believe that, first of all, the capacity, that's how, when I work, what I sense is that what is the most significant thing in this situation, and then it's being brought to the surface. I'm there to illuminate what's the most significant thing when I work with my oracular consultancy. So I very much always get to the core of what's most significant. And we see her do that. And never have I ever had any form of communication through me or insight when I tune in with people and situations without compassion, without empathy. And that's very much what she does. And Steven Spielberg is, if you look at all of his movies where he's been around these themes of extraterrestrial life or other life forms in general, is always coming back to empathy and compassion, understanding where they come from. That's why I think this movie is presenting the way, when we're tuning in consciously to any given situation, whether it's elite consciousness, the way I work or the way you work, or whether it's individuals, if we tune in with compassion and empathy in a conscious relationship, whether it's business, whether it's performance, whether it is relationships just in our private lives, I've never seen it come out without compassion, without empathy. And that is what I love about this, because when she is channeling guidance for people or insights or the language of that specific communication she has from outside of our planet, it never comes across threatening. And so when we then see the human who access, I call it alien technology, I think that's what they call it in the movie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when he applies technology, and through that alien technology, I would call it consciousness, we can call it AI, it's representing metaphorically many things. But when a human have ill intention and apply these things, then you can overpower this gift with negative intention and do wrong by other people. But that has nothing to do with her pure communication. When she consciously, she of course doesn't choose it. It's something that happens through her, which I would like to talk about a bit later, because I do believe we have a choice always if we train ourselves. But that's my belief. That's my experience. And so for me, it's so beautifully when we see when there's a conscious stream of communication, in this specific case from otherworldly communication, there's empathy and there's compassion in it. And that is why I really loved how Spielberg made this movie and many of his other movies.
I think that's a really interesting point that you made. And I noticed since I started working in the realms of consciousness, is not what I've really ever called it, but this intuitive connection and this creative stream and this ability to use mediumship to connect to people who've passed over. All of these things, they truly always come from a place of empathy, and which shocks me. No, it doesn't shock me. It comes from a place where people don't understand it, where they call out charlatans and things like that. But if they knew, people who work in these realms come from the kindest place, the most compassionate place. They want to help people feel better, to connect with their past people. And they do show a little bit of that in the film, but I don't know that people will understand quite that's what's happening. But for anyone who's a medium, which is, there are a whole lot of them certainly in my realm and in my work, and yours as well, or certainly in the wider area, then you can see all these things presented very beautifully, I might add, in that film. But I think that it's going to be a really beautiful education for people to understand, oh, is that what that is? So that's what I noted about it, is I saw intuition and psychic ability and mediumship as well, and how it affected the people around them very positively. Also, there was one other thing, Christel, I wanted to say to you was, I won't even use names, but there's two people in there, and they talk about, actually there's more than two, but because these people have come together for this particular job that they're doing on the film, I mean, they represent that connection that people have when they're soulmates, or they literally get each other, and it's like they meet for the first time and they say it out loud in the film, do I know you? Or I already know you, which is what happens when people meet each other as they're destined to. But not just lovers, friends, colleagues that you're immediately comfortable with, anyone that you feel immediately like you know them. So I thought that was also very beautifully done. It was far more than just about aliens per se.
Oh, I think it just goes above and beyond. And I think that's why it's such a beautiful movie. And it's also because we can talk about aliens, we can talk about other life forms outside of our planet. But the thing is, it's the same. Our intuition, the way we sense each other, the way we're connected. I've traveled the world hundreds of times with my work and lived in many different continents. But also in my spare time, I traveled in very remote areas and various places in the world. And I've been places where I didn't speak the language, but being invited into different kinds of cultural homes, and kindness, compassion, empathy, the curiosity, the willing to learn, the willing to invite somebody into our space, the learning simply by observation, that is universal. We feel each other, we sense each other, we know when somebody has ill intentions, we know when somebody has good intentions. I think this movie is speaking on so many levels, and that's why I also like the name of Disclosure Day, because when do we get to the point in history where we once again, as you said so beautifully in your introduction about your show, when logic meets the invisible. The invisible, it can be tangible. We might not see it with our human eye, or we may not understand the words. We saw Emily Blunt do her beautiful way of simulating alien language, and she does it really well. I find it very reliable. But when do we start to truly acknowledge the fact that we're not separate from the universe? We're not separate from one another. I love science. I'm an academic. For myself, even to speak about these things publicly, my ego had to be convinced to go into these kind of conversations, because I didn't want people to think that I have lost my mind. So, but because that's what the governments, that's what the public has made it into, something scary or something crazy, something outside of ourselves. But we're not separate. So we are consciously or intuitively always able to sense different kind of energies, different kind of people, or we call them aliens, extraterrestrial. But even animals, we see how different kinds of animals, they react to different people and other animals' energy. It doesn't have to be language. It doesn't have to be what we know. It doesn't have to be what our human eye sees to be factual or actual. And I think that is what this movie really shows us. But of course, for us, it's so natural. So that's why I think it's exciting to have this conversation, because Steven Spielberg, in my eyes, he truly translate the human or the universal capacity for communication and influence on one another so beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think, if I may jump very quickly to that specific thing, how we influence each other, many leaders that I work with, when they work with elite consciousness, when they get into the depth of how we can manage, how we influence not just our local community, but how we globally can impact each other through our thoughts and intention. When we work with that, first they're like, oh, that getting in the wrong hands will be really bad, or oh, now I can use this. And I always come back to, yeah, but ethics is a human conversation, but balance is universal. So if you have ill intentions, applying our intuition or the way we sense other people or the way we attract information or insights, if we go beyond other people's boundaries to use our intuition to either influence them to do something or to attract information that we were not allowed to, our energies go down, we get drained, and we literally attract the energy that we are trying to attract from other people. Mm-hmm. And when we see let's call him the bad guy, we might also go behind what his intention was. But the bad guy in the movie, not mentioning any names or anything, but when he applies alien technology to influence them to do something that's harmful and against their will and to hurt them, you see how much energy it cost him. Mm. And I think that's so beautiful, because when Emily Blunt gets out of her streams or her flow, she's energized to go do something. She's energized to go and act for humanity. And every time he applied that technology and that capacity that it brings, then he was extremely exhausted and he could hardly walk. You could see he transpired. You just saw what it cost him to apply negative attention to influence other people and other energies. So I see that every day, and we see it with people who have a bad day and they're grungy and the way they react towards other people, it comes right back at them because the world does not respond positively to somebody sending out negative energy. So even in that small, like everyday example from our own lives, how we're using our energies, how we're allowing ourselves to think, choose, and act on a daily basis is what we meet. And I think they show that on a very like military or on a different kind of level. That's also really important for us to understand. Do we behave like everything is a threat? What energy do we then send? Or do we meet it with curiosity and empathy and openness? What happens then? But there are many discussions here, but I just really loved that part as well, that when you stream consciously for the good of all, you get more energized. And when we apply it negatively, you just see the drain, you see the toll it takes on you. So you can never escape how you apply energy, intuition, consciousness. You can never escape it. And I love that in the movie as well.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm so excited about how Spielberg really took this movie and captivated the essence of various themes within our work, Toni.
I think you summed it up with the unseen, the senses that are not our physical senses. They're unseen, so they're essentially misunderstood. Having said that, I do feel like a lot of people now are, as they're meant to be, much more sensitive than they used to be. We see that with the kids born since 2000 that are extra sensitive. So, which just means they're more relational, defaulting to their intuition and sensing other people, animals, other energy. And it's a really beautiful thing. We saw with the animals, as you said, they do not respond with language, they respond with energy or frequency, I suppose is another way to say it. So that's what's going on. And same with, as you said, when you travel and you come across people who don't speak our language or we don't speak theirs, but you can still communicate. Somehow you can communicate, and it's just wonderful. And I think also the telepathy, there's been so much that's come out recently, the telepathy tapes and things where it was revealed how some people, kids, have this extraordinary capacity to speak without speaking. That's what all of this work that we do is as well, where you are picking up on your own intuition, guidance for yourself, where you are picking up on other people. And also if you're connecting to passed over people, or even beyond that, connecting to our soul is what I believe consciousness is. For us, to put it into human terms, we're tapped in, we all are tapped into that collective consciousness, which is, I always call it the soul in my work, but it's the collective consciousness. It's truly magical to work in this, and it's so magical to see this film come out and represent it so well and so beautifully. And for them to be able to put something like this in a visual format like that, where people who maybe never thought about it or never labeled it can see and probably go, oh, I can do that. Well, that happens to me. Oh, Christel, I wanted to say, sort of jump away from that a little bit, in that I wanted to talk about over the years, for 20 years working in these realms, slightly different to you, because initially mine was very much in the past lives and transcendent space. And we're going to talk about what oracular is for you and your work in leadership. I know we're using the similar senses or the same senses, but working with different areas of humanity. But what I found happened over the years was sometimes people would come to learn past life regression, and you would end up with let's say 10 students in the class, and all of them would be either have had an alien experience, or they were very interested, or they have been recalled being on other planets or having these other lives. I don't even want it to be about that. My point is, people who come together naturally draw to where they're meant to, and each of those people in that group, they feel seen. They get to discuss openly what they know or where they have been, who they really are. So there was many times, or quite a few times, that happened, and because it's never really been a big thing for me. But I have always believed since I was a little kid, because, Christel, my mama saw a ship behind our house, a very typical UFO sighting. And because she did, and she told us when we were little, it was never strange to us because, of course, if our mum said it, it was true. So there was that. And I think that set me up to be very open to all this. But before I throw this back to you, I also wanted to say, I don't know that I've ever come across anybody that said they don't believe that there's other life. I don't think I have. Everybody seems to be at least in my realms, they seem to be of the thought that, oh well, how could we possibly be the only beings? So yeah, very interesting. My point for that was back to disclosure. I think that people have been being prepared for a long time. So it's not that big of a shock. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when, as you were saying, most people have had, some people have either had some sort of experience. It doesn't have to be extraterrestrial, but some sort of experience with the invisible felt so tangible that they couldn't deny it.
Yeah.
So I think no matter who we speak to will have had that because it's part of our world. I don't think that science separated us from intuition and the invisible, the intangible that has not yet been measured structurally, because it's been measured, but there's just not been put the right structures, so they haven't been asked the right thesis in university, so they're actually researching the invisible. But what I find interesting is that most people don't want to talk about it publicly. And there are several layers of that, because one thing we know for a fact now, research has shown that, so now we can say that's evidence to that, that we can measure trauma in our DNA 17 generations now. And when we think about only 400 years ago, people were tortured, killed for talking about healing capacities. Even making a tea from chamomile would be witchcraft. Both men and women were tortured for the intuitive expanded gifts, that when they were applying that to help other people, they would get killed for it. Women's children were drowned in front of them for them to be forced to say they were witches and used witchcraft for some of the most natural thing on this planet. And even people were attacked, but it could be jealousy and many other things, and they would be tortured and killed for being a witch. So that's only 400 years back. That's not 17 generation back. So there is instinctively something within us that makes us be quiet about the invisible. That's one thing. And then the other thing is how governments would like to keep a lid on this, because it could be scary. It could create massive fear, because it's human instinct. We don't do well with change. We don't do well what we can't label. And I have been scared too, because in my work, I don't go out and promote any of this talking to extraterrestrial energies, or this is only recently that started. I wrote something on Substack about the topic as well. But I remember at that time I lived next to the American embassy in Denmark by the waterside. And so I knew there was a lot of surveillance around us. I was number 2 next door neighbor to them. And I've always been very careful because with my clients, I always have absolute 100% confidentiality. So I'm very careful of when I speak on the phone, what kind of communication tools do I use. So I'm very careful, very, very careful. And then one night I was sitting in my house meditating in the evening, and suddenly I felt a strong pressure. It felt like a presence had come into my house, that somebody has violated my personal boundaries. So first I was sure that was a burglar or something in my house. And then I tune into where is he or her, who is this? And I immediately feel this is not a physical presence, and the pressure intuitively comes to me. So I then ask, so who is in my presence? Who is here? And then I suddenly realized of course, it's telepathically, I feel this or sense this or hear this, but it's extraterrestrial energy or non-human energy that is coming from another place in our universe. And it's greeting me. And now I'm using human words because it came to have a communication. And it was very clear. It was testing where my boundary was. It was testing. It felt that I was uncomfortable. So it was kind of asking me, where would I feel comfortable that it was compared to my energy? And to me, it was about 15 meters away from my house. So I'm like, I remember visually that I made this circle, like visualized a circle around my house, 15 meters away from my house. And then I could breathe and I felt comfortable in my energy. And so it was kind of as if we were getting to know each other energetically. They visually clear knowing or clear visually. I would use that term because I was not taken into a craft at that point. I was being shown how it looked like within their craft, and energetically it was showing me how things looked. And there were many ways, but the primary thing was it was balance. It was balancing our energies. We were figuring out what would feel comfortable. It was probably also learning, but so was I. And it was an exchange. There was no violation. It was me interpreting it wrong first because something came in my field in a way that had it been human, it had gone through a locked door or locked window. But when I then asked myself, what is this then? If there's no humans in this house except for me, then what is it? I immediately figured out this was not trying to hurt me. That was a curiosity. Then after having this experience, I called a friend. And I remember telling her over the phone. And I also said to her over the phone, probably shouldn't have said it over the phone. A couple of weeks later, I had a call from, he said he was from military intelligence service from the UK. And he would like to have a meeting about what I do with my energetic work, the energistic leadership work. And I could hear he used phrases from my website, but he also had further information I could hear, but he didn't touch upon any extraterrestrial matter. So I was very excited to meet him, but intuitively, I felt I was not going to meet him in my house. So I asked to meet in a public lounge at a really nice hotel in town. And so I meet with him. And only afterwards, I figure out what an amazing way he attacked, the tactics he's used to question me and having me answer about my work and my methods. And then suddenly it went into extraterrestrial communication. And I said to him, I don't really talk about this because it's not a part of what I teach people. It's something up until now that I've had as personal experiences. And I don't want people to confuse my work. And he was very curious. He talked to me as it was the most normal thing. And I talked about other experiences I had as a child and that I had throughout life, that just affirming that communication. And after our meeting, he gets up and he shakes my hand as saying goodbye. And he holds my hand firmly. And he looked me in the eyes and he says, do never go online with this information. Do never talk about this online. You can disappear. We've seen people disappear. We've seen their identities being erased. It's very easy to do for the wrong or the right people. And then he left. He had given me his cards with his name and title and everything on it. And then the next day I called him because I wanted to, I was very surprised by that sudden warning, and he then walked out. So I would call him. I just wanted to ask him about this because he spent so much time with me on the topic. And when I called him the next day, the phone number didn't work and his emails didn't work. So his identity was not known. And afterwards, I realized the questions he posed me, he could only have if he had heard my phone conversation with my friend. And I only talked about it that one time because, as I say, with everything, I'm very specific. I'm very conscious of what I share from my private life, from conversations, from experiences. Because normally it's what I do with my clients, what I look into with the performance and their work, the visionary or the strategy or their most intimate things. We see it in the movie, going back to Disclosure Day. We see them, the way Emily Blunt, she immediately knows what is the most important thing to them. And it's very emotional. It's very personal always. That is what, that is who we are. That is what makes us work the way we do in life. That's how our emotional and nervous system is registered. So most times when we have to do important changes or advice, it always comes down to the people who are meant to do the task. So that's why it's so confidential. It's so vulnerable for the people I work with. So I'd never share. Never share.
What do you think, or who do you think he was? Do you think he was, an apparition isn't the correct term, but do you think that he was someone from an agency, or do you think it's some transcendent experience that's happened?
I felt very much like he came from, it could be governmental, it could be other, it was definitely the type of exchange experience. I can't go into details here. It was a 1 hour, 2 hour experience. But I think at that time, bear in mind, this is probably 18 years ago, 18, 20 years ago. So at that time, it might be the same concerns that are being revealed in the movie Disclosure Day, because the concerns are that the general public were not ready. And what will happen? Will we shift from the religious people? Will we shift from believing in God? Do we then start worshiping aliens? So from the government side of it, it's better that they are frightened because then we can control them. What happens if it's curiosity? Then what happens? Do we then lose control? So to me, when you ask, I've never been given the right answer, but I had a feeling that it was somebody in this human world that was here to stop me from sharing all the information that I had. Because if it had been otherworldly, now when I look back the last 15, 18 years, in closed rooms, I will get the communications and I will be given very precise information to governments, to international organizations, to leaders in very visionary industries. I'll be given either very precise information to how to move on, not only for the sake of their success, they will get the tools, but they also get information how to improve the standard of living for humanity, but also what energy, what is it that we're doing to space? Because, obviously, from a balance point of view, when we send nuclear waste into the universe, when we send off our rockets, we don't make sure that we take down the trash that we have with us. I don't know how many thousands and millions of satellites that we have out there now. We are starting to affect the universe with our presence on Earth. So there's a lot of how they want us to be very clear on the responsibility that our capacity is. So the more we get to grow, the more we develop, the more we also have the responsibility to not only care for the standard and on our planet, but the entire universe. And they're showing many things. They're very precise for the different kind of, so since then I've still been given information, and if it was the warning from somewhere else, it wouldn't have come through me, because I don't search for the information. It comes through me as every other precise information that I get from my clients in my oracular work.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think well, this is my summary. This is my summary of everything you've just said for now, or everything we've been discussing, is back to bringing this back into our human existence. The history of humanity and how long we've been here, we did start off very connected and very intuitive and very energetic. And speaking of fate and well, apparently anyway, and certainly in past life regression, people go through what is documented in history. Sometimes you get more information, but in a nutshell, we start off very sensitive. And then as humanity evolved, and this is as it was meant to, it evolved into becoming what we could put in simple terms as a power play. And we had our religions come in, and then people's intuition was squashed. People are deemed witches, and it squashes down that part of us, that energetic or unseen part of us. But now what's happened, we're so far through the human experience now, we're coming back to being very energetic again and very intuitive again. And of course, there's always been people who are, and we are two of those people, and a lot of the people we work with are very aware of how sensitive they are as well. But I think what's happening now is everyone's coming back to that more relational, more sensitive, more intuitive self. And I think that's why this disclosure is coming up as not fearful as it was presented before the last few years. So it seems like it's really exciting to watch what's going to happen. And of course, we are all anyone who's listening to this, we will get to witness how it all transpires. Oh, Christel, I wish we could keep talking. Probably we'll have to do it on another episode. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and also your story, because that is absolutely fascinating. It's very unique as well. What happened? I've always remembered it.
Yeah, very clear. And I think maybe we could have another conversation another time, because I know we're running out of time. But I know both for you and for me, we had these experiences. Now we're talking about the intuitive insights that are coming to us. But I know you've had experiences where it was very clear what happened, but you didn't get afraid. You just knew now there's a preparation for me to download certain information or exchange energy, and I for certain had it too. And we saw Goldie Hawn was sharing her experience on one of the interviews that we watched together, and I think there's so much information out there, as much as your personal experience and my personal experiences, that I wish that a lot of people would write or comment underneath what they have experienced, so that we can take another episode, like a follow-up episode, so that we can share more individual experiences and the more exact experiences where we knew that it was something different than human that was coming to us.
What it feels like. Oh, we have literally run out of time. Otherwise, I would love to be talking about that right now. Those experiences are some of the most important things in my life, or the most beautiful sensations that have happened. It's certainly not fearful. And I don't know that they are when anyone has them, but it would be nice to explain so that other people are like, oh, that's happened to me as well, in some way or at some time. Christel, before we do close, I wanted to just say that I looked at Steven Spielberg's life map, because it's a big part of what I do with soul life psychology, is like, why are you here? And we have this plan, we're born with it. And life map is a tool that I developed to outline that for you. But anyway, I looked at Steven Spielberg's life map, and he is Life Mission 5, the communicator. And we are also, Christel's a 5 and I'm a 5. There's many 5s out there, even working in these realms, because we are supposed to be communicating, and it's our mission also. But I thought that was really interesting that Steven Spielberg was number 5, and what he's done, not just with this film, with all of the films that he's created, they've had a much more underlying phenomenal message for the people. Yeah, I thought that was just interesting.
It is. That was also what captivated me in the movie. Like, I wrote him afterwards. I said, I know you've said in interviews that you don't believe you've had encounters, but maybe you had been streaming this communication your entire life, so that your life, every time you go into your creative flow, it's actually what's happening. It's an encounter. It's a communication. I couldn't help but writing him that. I was really, really excited to hear his comment compared to what we experience. So yeah, it's very exciting. I love that you did the map on him.
Yeah, really. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this today. I think our listeners are going to be very excited to hear your story, and we'll reconvene. But for now, I will say thank you very much, Christel. Where can people get in touch with you? Your website?
Yes, they can go to the contact page on my website, Rosenkilde or through my Instagram, which is also Christel Rosenkilde Christensen, and the same. So there are several ways or YouTube, my YouTube channel. I'm starting to use that a bit more. So subscribe, and you'll receive some of my thoughts and perspectives on elite consciousness and how I apply it.
Perfect. And I will put Christel's contact details in the show notes. Thank you very much, Christel.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you have any questions about this episode, or you want to make contact, pun intended, there is a form in the show notes, or you can always email me, team@tonireillyinstitute.com. Now, we just started Life Map Foundations this week, the 10-week program designed to help you understand your personality, purpose, strengths, vulnerabilities, and the plan that you're born with. Next intake is for recall therapy, where you learn to facilitate the exploration of past lives and beyond as extraordinarily effective therapy. So it's a module of SoulLife psychology that can be studied as a standalone practitioner certification or for purely personal development. Looking ahead, in upcoming episodes, I'll be sharing case studies from my recall therapy confidential files to help you understand not only why it works, but how the experience impacts you so beautifully. I had to interrupt our regular scheduled programming where we were talking about emotional bruises. So still to come will be episodes on the emotional bruises that drive why some people feel responsible for other people. I mean, overly responsible, and how perfectionism can be a blessing and a curse. There's so much to cover. If you are enjoying these episodes, it is so helpful, and it helps to reach more people if you hit subscribe or follow and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, self-awareness is the ultimate activism.
What's the definition of insanity? Ain't it just a difference in reality?